but actually to intimidate people who are scared by law enforcement officials. So that was the overall outcome of what happened. Now let's talk a little bit about what we did. What we view ourselves as in all the different permutations of Next Gen America, Next Gen Rising, Need to Impeach, For Our Future. We're a grassroots organization. We're trying to go directly to American citizens and get them involved in the political process, make sure that they participate. We go at it from both ends of the spectrum, if you think about it from an age standpoint. So Next Gen America's, by far our biggest program is Next Gen Rising, which is specifically aimed at 18 to 35-year-olds. So that is where we are trying to get the youngest age cohort, which is the largest age cohort in America, the most progressive age cohort in America, and the most diverse age cohort in American history to turn out. This is a group which in the past has voted at literally half the rate of other American citizens. And I can say, just to talk a little bit about this, we are organized at Next Gen Rising by congressional district. I told you our big decision in win-loss here was flipping the House. We are organized originally in 33 congressional districts across 11 states. We took that up to somewhere about 38 to 40. But when you do grassroots work and you get somebody involved in going to the polls, that means hopefully that they will vote the whole ballot, including governor, senator, Congress, state leg, state senate, and propositions, whatever else is on the ballot. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that turned out, but let me say this. Overall, we thought this was a turnout election from day one. It was a turnout election. Turnout was at a really high level. But for people 18 to 29, which is how some of these firms measure it, 18 to 29, which is our age cohort, they turned out at the highest level ever since 18-year-olds were allowed to vote in 1971. The turnout was up really dramatically in the places we are, in the districts and in the precincts where we were organizing. It was up really, really dramatically. In addition, this age cohort had more than a 30% spread between Democrats and Republicans. So if you just do the math on that, more than 65% of them voted for Democrats, less than 35% of them voted for Republicans. That's 2 to 1. So we got the biggest age cohort in America increasing its participation by the most ever, participating at the highest level ever with a 2 to 1 spread D to R. That is a dramatic fact about why Democrats had such a good day on Tuesday. When you talk about, and let me say a little bit about that, we had 15,000 volunteers. Thank you very much. We had 750 people on staff. Thank you very much. We are on 420 college campuses. Think about that, including a ton of community colleges and HBCUs. We sent over 9 million text messages. This was the biggest youth voter mobilization effort in American history. So let's talk for 1 second about need to impeach. Need to impeach, we turned into need to vote about 2 months before November 6th. We did a series of town halls where we talked to people. We also asked the people on our list. So we have over 6.2 million people on our list. We asked the people on our list to make sure that, to kind of support each other, to encourage each other to vote. In that effort, we got 80,000 of you to write handwritten postcards to each other, particularly to people in swing congressional districts, 43 targeted swing congressional districts. We sent out over 1.6 million handwritten postcards. Just to put that in context, in 2004, the Howard Dean for President campaign did a gigantic postcard writing effort, and they sent out 30,000. We sent out over 1.6 million. And when we think about the impact of need to impeach, to put it in context, normally this group of over 6 million Americans, we went and looked, votes at less than 40% of them historically vote in midterm elections. We know that because we can go to the voter file. we made a goal to make sure that 75% of us voted, and we really wanted that to be a floor and do better. That's 2 million additional voters. And when I said, that's a gigantic number, about 100 million total people voted in the elections, and approximately 50 million Democratic votes were cast. We're talking about 2 million additional votes, 4 million, more than 4 million total from this list, which is the largest active political online community in the United States, bigger than the NRA. So when we're talking about the impact of that, let me give you an example of what people were willing to do. There is a woman named Mary Rose Brown who I spoke to on Tuesday morning, who lives in Iowa Falls, Iowa, 92 years old, and made the decision to send out 1,000 handwritten postcards. And I talked to her to say, thank you so much. And she said, it's something I can do. If we don't win, what's going to happen to our children and grandchildren? And by the way, I sent 700 of my handwritten postcards to the Des Moines congressional area, the congressional area that includes Des Moines, Iowa. So there was a highly contested congressional campaign, which was won by the Democrat. So what we saw, we dealt on next gen predominantly with young people, 18 to 35. We also did a campaign door to door with organized labor called For Our Future, where we knocked on literally millions of doors of sporadic Democratic voters. But Need to Impeach has a demographic which is older, which tends to be at the upper end of the demographic voting range. So we really went after both sides, the barbell of Democratic voters, to try and make sure that if this was going to be a participation election, that we showed up in the biggest possible way that we could. So what does it mean? You know, I said, where do we go from here? So I think the basic generalization is that this was a step forward in terms of restoring America to a path towards justice and prosperity, but it's just a step. And we're going to have to be straightforward in telling the truth about what's gone on in our country, about what's basically been a hostile corporate takeover of the democracy. We're going to have to offer a new vision of the future, and we're going to have to hold our corrupt, lawless president accountable in a real way, because what we've seen is his behavior only gets worse. Subsequent to Tuesday night, one day after the election, he fired the attorney general who refused to rein in, or he recused himself from reining in the Mueller investigation, and replaced him with somebody who's on the record as saying the Mueller investigation should be extremely limited and should not be allowed to proceed. So what we know from Tuesday night is that winning a majority means very little if our leaders are not willing to stand up for their constituents and for our democracy. What we are asking for, what the American people asked for on Tuesday night, was a transformational approach to politics. We're committed, I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to move our country forward, but that is going to mean being more than just a debating society in the House of Representatives. They have the ability to prevent legislation, they have the ability to do oversight, but in the path forward, we need to tell the truth, protect the rule of law, and work 24 hours a day of justice for all. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my pal, Kevin Big Mac.
Thanks, Tom. My name's Kevin Mack. I'm the lead strategist for the Need to Impeach campaign. You just summed up very well what we did this cycle, so I'll be very brief. I just want to start off by thanking the 6.2 million people who signed the petition. What an enormous accomplishment it's been over the last year to see people come together in all 50 states to go out and make an impact and broaden our democracy. And I'm going to give two examples of what that looked like in this election cycle. So, as Tom mentioned, a third or so of our members turn out in every single election, and because people were so fired up this time, we felt like a second third of them would go to the polls. So let's just call that 60%. And our big goal was to get at least 75% of our petition signers to turn out in this election cycle. That means we had an outsized impact in races across the country, and I'm going to give you an example of just two. So we're a 50-state movement. And so let's use Wisconsin as an example. We have 95,000 petition signers in Wisconsin. So if you take the math I just gave you a minute ago, if roughly 33,000 of them would have voted no matter what, and an additional 30,000 or so would have voted in this election cycle because they were fired up, it's that last 30,000 that's really the key. So when Democrats win a seat by 30,849 votes, and we work together to turn out an additional 30,000 people who would have otherwise voted, that's the difference between winning and losing. That's what democracy looks like, and that's what we set out to accomplish when we launched this thing a year ago, which was to make sure people had a big voice in this election process. Another example of that, and Tom referenced it, is how we went from starting off as just an online petition and then trying to get the establishment to do their jobs and hold Donald Trump accountable, and then we morphed into an election machine through Need to Vote. And so I'm going to give you an example of that. In Virginia 2, a district that I went to high school and college in, we had 13,210 petition signers. At the end of the day, we think 9,908 of them actually turned out, which is 75%. And the margin of victory in that seat is 6,015 votes, meaning we think we had an enormous impact on that election. And we also had 19,078 note cards written into that district, so from NTI signers to NTI signers to turn them out. And we replicated that in all the districts around the country to show that we could have a big impact, and that, one of the reasons people were going to the polls was to hold Donald Trump accountable. Now, as we move forward, we've now got over 80,000 people that wrote these handwritten note cards. We've got another 100,000 or so people that take every online action we ask them to take. And we've got millions of people who want to take more actions as we head into holding Donald Trump accountable. And so I guess the message I would give you is this. We're not going away. We're not going to, pat ourselves in the back too much. This is just a step in the process to get our country back. And we are in the process of figuring out next steps for keeping pressure on Trump, holding the establishment accountable, making sure we get past impeachment to issues that impact people's daily lives, and to make sure that this massive online movement continues to have an outsized impact on the, conversation that's taking place in this country. So I want to save plenty of time for questions, so I'll end it up there, and we'll turn it over to the Executive Director of NextGen, Heather Hargraves.
Thanks, Kevin. And thanks everyone on the phone. I just wanted to briefly give a few more details about NextGen Rising, NextGen America's youth program, and highlight some of the things that Tom Steyer already said. NextGen America played an unprecedented role in deciding the outcome of crucial elections across the country, with roughly 31% of young voters turning out to vote, which was the highest midterm turnout since, as Tom mentioned, since 18-year-olds were given the right to vote. In hotly contested governor's races like Nevada and Wisconsin, youth turnout was even higher, averaging 35%. And on election day, we were tracking youth-dense precincts, 41 youth-dense precincts across the country, and in 38 of them, turnout surpassed 2014 levels, with turnout looking much closer to presidential levels than normal midterm levels in nearly all of the precincts. And just to give a few more examples to put some color on this, in Wisconsin, youth turnout surged on college campuses across the state, including in the city of Madison, where 93% of registered voters turned out, giving Tony Evers a crucial boost in helping him vanquish Scott Walker. At each Stroudsburg University precinct in Pennsylvania, turnout went from 30% in 2014 to 65% in 2018, a jump that helped Susan Wiles cross the finish line in PA 7, a key flip for Democrats in Pennsylvania. Similarly, at Michigan State University precincts in competitive Michigan 8, turnout increased by 30 points over 2014 levels, helping us upset an incumbent GOP congressman. From California to Iowa to Michigan, young voters also helped send young candidates to victories. Katie Hill in California, Abby Finkenauer in Iowa, and Haley Stevens So Next Gen, as I said, really played an unprecedented role in helping turn out young people, which was our goal from the beginning of this election cycle. So as Kevin said, we want to leave room for questions. So I am going to turn it back over to Ben to help moderate.
Totally.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks to everyone who talked. I think Tom has a point that he wants to make real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Aaliyah for questions.
Before we get to questions, I just wanted to make sure that not only did Democrats have a big night, but that we were involved in an awful lot of the congressional flips. If you look at NTI, we've targeted, I think, 43 races. We officially have won 30. We're leading in 2 more. That's about a 75% win rate, and that is 100% flips. That is seats held by Republicans, won by Democrats. We have a win percentage in Next Gen that is something close, it's about 2/3, which is also, those are overwhelmingly flips. So that means in every one of those, we had a Republican-held seat that we're trying to turn into a Democrat. To put that in context, the net flip by Democrats was 30 for the whole country. So when you think about where we were and what we accomplished, we were involved in the overwhelming bulk of all the flips in the United States of America. So that means that we chose to be in the places, either we chose to be in the places that could be flipped and made a big difference, or we made that difference ourselves. And it's indisputable that is a fact when you look at the outcomes. Sorry, Ben, I just want to make sure that people knew that actually what had happened not only worked, but had a gigantic impact.
Yeah, no need to apologize for being proud of the work we've done. So with that, I'm going to turn it over actually to my coworker, Aaliyah, who is running our question and answer portion. Aaliyah?
Hi, everyone. I'm Aaliyah Cavalier. I'm the Communications Director for Next Gen America. I'm joined by Eric Olvera, who is Head of Communications for Need to Impeach. We are going to field some questions for Tom, Heather, and Kevin. The first question is from Evan Halper, who is from the LA Times, and it's for Tom. He wants to know, how did this election build the case that Democrats should field a progressive candidate for the White House in 2020? The most prominent statewide candidates who ran on an unapologetic progressive platform fell short, like Andrew Gillum and Beto O'Rourke. Do you think that the lesson from Tuesday is that the path back to the White House is through the center?
Evan, I want to thank you for being a signatory to Need to Impeach and also a volunteer for Next Gen. Both are highly appreciated here in San Francisco, California. Let me say this. This was a turnout election. What happened on Tuesday was that progressives, young people, women, people of color came out in numbers that we've never seen before. And one of the things that we didn't say during this call, but that is a really important part of what happened, is that a record number of women got elected and a record number of people of color got elected. And I haven't heard this as a statistic, but I know that there were high-level members of the LGBTQ community who got elected. And so you're asking, is the way for us to try to be in the middle, to be moderate Democrats, or is it for us to be what progressive? And let me say this, I think that is a false frame, Evan. I know it's the common one, but I see it in a different way, and that's this. I see American politics basically failing, except in the places where people are willing to tell the truth about what's actually going on the ground in America. I see us unwilling at a federal level to deal with the basic issues of budget, health, education, immigration. We have a federal budget, federal government that is dysfunctional. What the American people overwhelmingly were asking for was truth. Not progressiveness or moderation. They were asking for change, for us to address our issues. So I think whoever is going to be the nominee of either party, I think the critical question is, do you understand what's going on the ground really for people who need health care so they don't die, kids who need education so that they can actually compete in their lives and live out their dreams? Do you understand what's going on the ground, and do you have a compelling vision for what should happen and how to get there? Because that is what the American people are begging for. Because what we're seeing actually is dysfunction and an ability to address the basic issues in our society today. And actually just talking about it isn't enough. We've got to have a way of understanding how we actually get there and what the vision is that people want to live out.
Great. Our next question is from, give me 1 second, they're coming in so quick, I keep losing them. It's from Dean, and he wants to know if you can provide your input on the regarding Jeff Sessions and how it'll affect the Mueller investigation.
So this is early, and I don't think I'm going to say anything that is particularly unique. Jefferson Sessions had recused himself from oversight of the Mueller investigation or anything having to do with Russia. As a result, this investigation was overseen by Rod Rosenstein, and basically it was allowed to proceed. We are now getting close to a major event, which is the release of a lot of the investigation that he's done over the last multiple months. By firing Mr. Sessions and replacing him with someone who's on the record as saying the Mueller investigation should be dramatically limited, basically Mr. Trump has declared that this investigation has to either be limited or to stop, and he has said that he has adopted a warlike stance towards his own oversight by Congress, which is mandated in the Constitution. So actually getting rid of Mr. Sessions and declaring war on the Constitution is exactly what we've been predicting in our need to impeach campaign. We've been saying this president is reckless, dangerous, and lawless. And what he did was take that a step further, the way people like him always do. We've been saying for a year, the evidence is all in. This is an absolutely transparent attempt, not just to obstruct justice, but to attack the idea of the rule of law itself. If the President of the United States is not subject to the rule of law and the Constitution, that sends a dramatic message to every single person in this country that we're not under the rule of law. And I can tell you that if you look at the countries around the world that are not subject to the rule of law, it doesn't end well. And so every time we appease him, every time we submit to him, every time we don't stand up for what's right, it gets worse. And so we've been saying for more than a year, there's only one actual solution to this, and that is to do the right thing, to impeach him and remove him from office. And we didn't know all the events that would make us right, but this is an event in flashing neon that says, oh, by the way, need to impeach.
Our next question is from Kelly, who says that she agrees with Tom's point about a hostile corporate takeover of our country. It's been going on for years, and of course, Citizens United did not help. How can we get rid of it and get corporations out of running this country?
So let me just start by saying, Kelly, that you and I are part of almost 8 out of 10 Americans who think our democracy has been purchased by corporations. It's been going on systematically for at least 40 years. It's meant that corporations and rich people have gotten 100% of the increase in productivity and profits that the United States as a country has generated over the last 40 years. And it is now a central part of our politics. We are only going to be able to solve the policy issues I mentioned earlier, things like healthcare, education, living wage, pollution, Americans' right to have clean air and clean water. If we solve this political problem, which involves money in politics, get back to the idea of equality of voting. And in order to do that, we're going to have to get rid of money in politics. We're going to have to get rid of gerrymandering. We're going to have to get rid of voter suppression. And we're going to have to enshrine again the absolute equality of right for every vote for every person, and government of, by, and for the people. And it's going to be a systematic attempt to get public funding of elections, but more than that, restricting the rights of corporations and money to control elected officials through their campaign contributions.
So our next question is from Michael, who's actually a regional organizing director for NextGen in Wisconsin. Tom, he wants to know, Tuesday's results make me highly worried about our ability to address climate change. What, in your opinion, do you think we should do, and what's the best way forward to start to address climate change?
So I think climate is a fantastic example of the dysfunction in our government in Washington, D.C. It is almost the perfect example, because I believe it is, first of all, let's start with what's at stake. The United Nations, backed by the vast scientific community around the world, said about a month ago that if we did not solve the climate problem by 2030, we would be subject to unimaginable suffering. So we have a 12-year clock that is ticking every single day to avoid unimaginable suffering. We have a party which controls an awful lot of the government machinery in the United States of America, which does not agree with the scientific community without having any argument on their side, which is fighting cheaper, cleaner energy that will make Americans healthier and richer. More jobs, better paying jobs. So what can we have a question of where there is absolute objective laydown for clean energy and climate solutions that will make Americans richer, better employed, higher wages and healthier, lower cost energy, or the interest of the fossil fuel companies and their owners. And right now, the Republican Party is 100% foursquare behind the bottom lines of fossil fuel companies, and that they don't even try and make an argument about it because they have no argument to make. So, in my opinion, this is the perfect example of where we have to win. We have to get rid of these people. There is not a question about discussing it. They won't even talk in public about this because they don't have anything to say, because they have no argument. They just have money and corporate power. This is an absolute clear example of straight up political corruption, and we have to beat it. There's no other choice. There's no conversation. And when they try and go half measures to delay things or pretend we don't know what's going on or say, let's really study this, we have to ignore them. We have a 12-year clock running to unimaginable suffering, and we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the next generation. We owe it to the generation to absolutely do the right thing, because we don't have a choice.
Great. Our next question is going to go to Kevin Mack, who's the lead strategist for Need to Impeach. Thomas Hotz wants to know, since the Republican Senate will ultimately block efforts at impeachment, and Pelosi isn't encouraging it as a strategy at this time, what active efforts is Need to Impeach planning or will plan to help make it possible?
So thanks, Aaliyah, and thanks, Thomas, for the question. I would say a couple of different things. First and foremost, Need to Impeach is not going away. We launched this effort. People said, oh, boy, this will never happen. And the point that we make over and over and over is that to people who signed our petition, impeachment is a value statement. We need to rid the country of Donald Trump and Trumpism, and the people in Washington, impeachment is a legislative process, and so it's two different things. So what are we going to do? Well, we talked about this earlier. We've got hundreds of thousands of volunteers. They are ready to hold this Congress accountable, and we are going to fire them up to put pressure on members of Congress. Now, there's two things to think about there. One is there's going to be a lot of investigations by Democrats in the House, and two, hopefully there'll be a Mueller report that comes out at some point, and we can work on both of those things at the same time. Now, the last point is this. I found it interesting that Mrs. Pelosi, who we all respect, yesterday said that she doesn't really want to talk about impeachment, and then just a couple hours later, Jeff Sessions got fired, right? So I would just caution every lawmaker in Washington not to make big, bold pronouncements about what you may or may not do. Let's see where these investigations lead. Let's see what comes out. He's already passed the threshold for impeachment, and as Tom always says, This will be the best day of the Trump presidency. He's a malignant narcissist. He's only going to get worse. More things are going to come out from Jared Kushner, from Trump Jr., from Roger Stone, and just keep going down this list. It will get worse before it gets better, and we're going to do everything we have to do to make sure your voices are heard.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. So our next question is from Vega, and it's going to go to Heather Hargraves, who's the Executive Director for Next Gen America. She wants to know, do you believe, as I do, that the groups to focus on in the next election should be college kids, women, and minorities? Thanks, Vega. Yes, is the short answer.
What did you pay her to ask that question?
And I'm sure Tom will like to elaborate, but as he mentioned earlier, we believe in creating the broadest possible democracy, and that means encouraging more people to participate, especially people that haven't been engaged in the political process, whether or not that's because they've been disillusioned about the process or because of voter suppression efforts. But we know that when more young people, women, and people of color do engage, that we get the results that we need because they are more progressive. And, I think it's important to note that the majority of this country supports things like taking action on climate change and common sense gun control. But part of the problem is that not enough people are actually participating in our elections, and that we need to encourage that by engaging with those communities. And one thing that helps is what we saw this Tuesday is more candidates that are coming from those communities. Younger candidates, like I mentioned, women, people of color, and we saw great wins from those candidates on Tuesday as well. Tom, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
As always, I agree with you, Heather.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Anya Young from Forbes. Tom, for you, you state that we have to get money out of politics, but both Next Gen and Tom Steyer gave $120 million towards various midterm initiatives. That, of course, also was from Need to Impeach as well. Wealthy people, without a doubt, play a huge role in our politics, especially today. How do you differentiate what you do from the other dark money in politics elsewhere?
So first of all, I don't think we are dark money, so let me start with that. Our system is imperfect, and we're strongly in favor of getting rid of Citizens United. I'm strongly in favor of state-funded elections. In the system we have, I recognize that money, particularly corporate money, is corrupting our politics and leading us to decisions and outcomes that are not of by and for the people. Here's how we try and make sure that, given where we are, that what we do is something that we're really proud of. One, we're a grassroots organization. What we're doing, by and large, is going directly to people, whether it's trying to engage college students, whether it's trying to get online petitions, whether it's going door to door. What we're trying to do is encourage the broadest possible democracy. That's our goal. That's what we do that is our method in everything we do. Second of all, we're transparent. We explain what we're doing, why we're doing. There is no secrecy to who we are, and we try and make sure that we disclose everything so that people can understand what's happening. Third of all, we do not do anything that helps my pocketbook. We've tried to make sure that not only does that not in fact true, that no one could even make the argument. For a while, people said that this was all a ruse by me to make money off green energy investments, one of the silliest and stupidest arguments I've ever heard. Even so, we made sure that any clean energy investment I made was put in a foundation so that if it turned out to be a gigantic bonanza, that money would never come to me. So when we think about what we're doing in the context of this system, we are pushing as hard as we can for the broadest democracy that represents people more fully who are underrepresented, and we're doing it strictly based on what we think is right and to stand up for American values and the American people. People can disagree with us, but there's no question that what we're doing is entirely different from the dark money, which does none of those things. It is systematically going after its own interest, hiding what it's doing, and that's why it's called dark money. It's done in the dark for its own purposes, and it's subverted our democracy and taken power away from the over 300 million Americans and put it in the hands of the richest Americans who own the biggest corporations.
Great. Our next question is from someone who is identifying themselves as Chief, and it's for Heather and Kevin. Is any organization analyzing which techniques work best for getting out the vote? Was it block blocking or phone banking or postcards or handwritten letters? Which techniques were most effective for GOTV? Thanks, T. There's actually a lot of evidence from previous election cycles on what works for GOTV and testing that NextGen and NTI has done in the last year or two as well. We know that the number one thing to get people to turn out to vote is talking to them face to face. So canvassing or talking to people on a college campus or wherever is extremely effective. Also text messaging. We've done a couple of tests to prove that text messaging actually helps turn out voters, especially young voters, immediately prior to election. And handwritten postcards has been proven to actually help turn out voters as well, which is why it was one of the tactics that NTI used. So then it's also important to note there's also research to show the messages that we want to make sure that we're using. So one of the most important things to talk to people about for GOTV is making sure that they have a plan on how they're voting. Are they going to go vote at an early vote location? Do they know the information about the election when the polls open? Are they planning to go before work or after work? Talking to voters about the plan that they're making around voting is critical. The last thing I will say is that we know for young people especially, but for everyone, friends talking to friends is always persuasive, and making sure that everyone on this phone, I'm sure, understands this message because you've all probably told all of your friends and family to go vote, and that is a more persuasive messenger than any other person can be. And so continuing to encourage other people to talk to their friends and family is something that we'll continue to work on.
Yeah, and I'll just add two things onto that. First of all, there's two ways to look at getting out the vote, right? One of them is tactical, and I think Heather just covered that very well. There's a number of different tactics, and Tom's invested in this effort in a way that we can tell which tactics work the best. But the second part of that is messaging, is what you actually say. And one of the things I'm most proud of when it comes down to this impeachment campaign is that we were not afraid to say what 80% of Democrats believe, and that is this president should be impeached. And so you can have all the tactics you want, but if you're not willing to speak truth and you're not willing to say things that might seem slightly controversial to people who watch Fox News, then forget it. Don't complain about it when people don't actually vote.
Okay, our next question is from Lewis, and I think this is probably for Kevin and Tom. Lewis says, I've had an Impeach Trump sign in my front yard for over a year. He notes that he lives in Tennessee, and that he hasn't had any vandalism on his house, even so. And he says that he is concerned that a partisan effort to impeach could backfire, and he wants to know, how can we get Republicans on board, as it happened with Nixon?
So, Louis, that is a fundamental question, because the only way that a president can realistically be impeached and removed from office is if the American people insist on it in a nonpartisan way. If you actually look at the mechanics of this process in the Congress of the United States and the Senate of the United States, it can't be done by Democrats. It's got to be something that goes across the aisle. And so the only way to appeal, the entire appeal for this is on a patriotic basis. We are not replacing this president with a Democrat. If Mr. Trump is impeached and removed from office, he will be replaced by a conservative Republican from Indiana with whom I disagree on virtually every single policy area and who offends me deeply in some of them. But that's not the point here. The question here is the system itself was attacked yesterday by this president. The president declared yesterday that he is above the law in multiple ways. He's above the law in terms of the special prosecutor, and he is above the law in terms of the constitutional power of the Congress to oversee him and make sure that he's not breaking the law. He has declared war on the law itself. So from my standpoint, this is not a question of partisanship at all. This is a straightforward question of patriotism. That's the message we're trying to send out. Whether we can break through the Fox News, Wall Street Journal, Breitbart, Daily Caller, Facebook environment that surrounds a lot of the people who are Trump supporters is a real question. But the message that we're giving is straight up patriotism, and the people who came to our almost 40 town halls in states around this country were there for straight up patriotism. The system's under attack. It's a system that we love, prize, and depend on, and we're here to protect it by getting rid of someone who happens to be the president who's attacking it on a daily basis.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and it's from David Wright from CNN. He says that, Tom, you just said whoever is going to be the nominee of either party, the critical question is, do you understand what's going on the ground really? That people need healthcare, they need education, and that they need a compelling vision for the future. Do you think you could be one of those people?
Well, let me say this. So, David, I have had the incredible luxury, privilege, pleasure, and honor of going around the country doing town halls for the last year. And when we go to, and a lot of those have been in red states. If we go to Greensboro, North Carolina, I do a town hall and several hundred people come and we have a conversation for an hour and a half and I learn some stuff and, we exchange views and I do. But when I go, I also go and meet people from there. I try and make sure that I meet young people. We usually go to places we're organizing. So I'll meet young people who are going to college, who aren't going to college, who are going to community college, who are going to a historically black college. I'll meet people on the ground. I'll meet activists. I'll try and go meet people in the communities. I'll meet people who are, in the local Democratic Party, but I'll also meet just people who are involved. So I've gotten a chance to see how close to the bone these questions really are. There were two people who came out to our town hall in Newark, New Jersey, which was about 3 weeks ago, who stood up independently, and each of them said, if they repealed the Affordable Care Act, I wouldn't be here because I'd be dead. When you're talking about health care, one of the people in our office told us when they passed the Affordable Health Care Act, he cried because his daughter has a pre-existing condition. We're not, when I was in Greensboro, North Carolina, I was talking to an 18-year-old guy who got a 4.1 in college, 4.1 in high school, who's African-American, who got into college and couldn't afford to go. When we're talking about clean air and clean water, Americans' right not to be poisoned. Go around this country and talk to people who are sick because they've been breathing coal ash, because they're sick because if you go to Flint, Michigan, because they've been drinking unfit water. This stuff is close to the bone. Until you start to get, until you start to realize how close people are in terms of not earning enough money to get by on, that there hasn't been a raise in real terms in buying power for the average American for 40 years, 2 generations. Until you start to realize how close to the bone it really is, then I don't think you're capable of even understanding what these issues are. They're just debates. And so let me say this about myself, which I've been saying. I am committed to doing whatever it takes to tell the truth and win back the trust of Americans for our political system. We need a political change. At the heart of this is the removal of equality of voting, equality of rights for American citizens. And we absolutely have to address that so we can deal with the absolute needs, the close to the bone needs of Americans, because you are not free if your kid is dying. You are not free if you get a 4.1 in high school but don't get to go to college. You are not free if you spend all your time worrying about the most basic issues of life in a society that is not supporting you and not making it possible for you to live out your dreams.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to Tom and Heather and Kevin and everyone who asked a great question. We have run out of time, but I want to encourage reporters who are on the call to email press@nextgenamerica.org if they have any questions. And for all of our volunteers and staff and supporters who are on the phone, we will not stop fighting, and we are excited to be in this fight with you all. So thanks so much for joining. The fight continues, and we are so proud to be able to do it side by side with you all. Thanks so much, and have a good rest of your week.